Panelimize hoş geldiniz.
Welcome to our panel. I'm sure that you know our speakers, but I will give them the opportunity to introduce themselves with a couple of sentences. In this panel, we will speak about the new direction of growth in the real estate sector. Of course, there are some misperceptions about some of the concepts, and unfortunately, sometimes the real estate sector is mistaken with the construction sector. Of course, construction is quite important for the real estate sector, but there is an important difference between these two sectors, and the intellectual portion of this issue is quite significant. Construction, the most important input of construction is the land, and the construction is about supplying things. But when you speak about the real estate sector, you are speaking about the sector in which the use rather than supply is more dominant. And the real estate is all about the supply and demand. That's why I really would like to make a differentiation between the real estate sector and the construction sector. And in our panel, most probably, we will not be touching to the details of the construction sector, although it is quite an important sector for our country. Very briefly, I want our speakers to introduce themselves with one or two sentences, and then very briefly, I want them to speak about the future of the real estate sector. Let's start with Aziz Torun. Good afternoon to everyone, and in a couple of minutes, I believe we are going to say good evening. I believe we should provide a discount for the ones who stayed that late. I believe they really deserve an award and a discount. Well, our moderator has been working for 2 days, has been preparing some questions, but we didn't know from which topic he is going to ask a question. And I am quite lucky, I believe, since I will be the first one to answer the questions, because our moderator has prepared himself for this session, preparing questions. Okay, Torunlar Reik, I'm the chairman and the CEO of Torunlar Real Estate. And for about 4 years, I worked for the real estate investment foundation president, and I will transfer my position to someone else in the foundation very soon. After such an introduction, it has been stated by our moderator that there is a misconception and a confusion between the real estate sector and the construction sector in Turkey. And we always said that we are active in the real estate sector, not in the construction sector, because construction sector is, as the name suggests, about constructing buildings. And in addition to that, the management of those constructions and the selling of those constructions are the two different phases out of 4 of this sector. I had a chance to listen to many of the sessions. I listened some of them inside of the room. I tried to listen to them some of the sessions from online, and I try to understand and learn something. And many of the speakers mentioned to an important concept, which is innovation. It is quite a magical word, but in the real estate sector, it is not logical for us to say that the innovation is quite present, but I believe Erden Timur is one of the people who is innovatively working in his business. And the sector needs, the real estate sector needs innovation. We should take into consideration new materials and new demands coming from the customers. Just because the demand was superseding the supply up until now, maybe we try to preserve the status quo. We used high quality materials, and as comparison to the 10 years ago, the quality of our buildings improved a lot, but we cannot say that, and we have to admit that we are not using the innovation to the extent that we desire. And for the future of this sector, I believe the sector really needs innovation. Thank you very much. Please do not go into the details of the innovation, just make a general introduction. I know that I have 3 minutes to explain myself. Good afternoon to everyone. I also support the discount issue that has been stated by the previous speaker. The summit was so beneficial and so enjoying. You honored me, but my advantage is my age. Anyone in my age would definitely do business innovatively. First of all, I am a father. I have a daughter, and my Ministry of Finance introduced himself as such, and I really liked it. And I really believe that a person should introduce himself or herself with the things that he or she gives the most importance. Yes, construction sector and real estate sector is different from each other. And because of such an habit, whenever people ask us, are you in the real estate sector, then we say yes. The definition of the real estate is based on investments. But in our internal meetings, I would like to say sincerely, we are doing designs in order to touch the lives of the people. We know that in the houses that we design, the children will grow, and we have to attach importance to our business, because if you value people, then the people will appreciate what you do. On the perception, everybody thinks us that we are only constructing ugly buildings, but this is not we do. We have the chairman of the board of TOKİ with us, and he knows the situation very well. Süleyman Çetinsaya is with us. He is the chairman of the board of Artaş Construction, and he is still in the management of the building that he has constructed. We are dealing with the problems and the daily life problems of the people, and we are indeed trying to touch to the lives of the people as possible as we can. I believe we should change the name of the sector rather than calling it real estate. Mr. Ergün, good afternoon to everyone. Today I was able to reach to this conference. There are many people who have been attending to these conferences. For about 3 years, I was working as the chairman of the board for TOKİ and the Housing Development Administration of Turkey. And if I'm not mistaken, the topic of this session was the new direction of growth in the real estate sector. I worked in the private sector. I also worked in the public administration side. And right now I'm working as the chairman of the board of the Housing Development Administration of Turkey. TOKİ, the Housing Development Administration of Turkey, is targeting the mid-income population and low-income population. And with thanks to this board, new innovations are indeed promoted by our administration. I will touch on to a couple of points, and in the second round, hopefully, I will try to answer the questions. The real estate sector is among the sectors that have been criticized, and people are claiming that the reason why the industry is not developing so much is because of the dominance of the real estate sector. We don't agree with such an understanding because if Turkey will reach its 2025 goals, then the real estate sector should indeed be in a better position than it is right now. The other topic might be discussed in different sessions why the industry is not in its desired place. But what I believe, if Turkey will indeed reach to its targets, then the real estate sector should be in a better position than it is today. In 2008, 428,000 buildings have been sold in the real estate sector. In 2016, despite the coup attempt and despite the geographic problems, the sellings reached out to approximately 1.3 million. If I'm going to speak about the production values in the real estate sector, in 2006, the production of the buildings was approximately 320,000, and we reached to 760,000 of new buildings at those years. And I also would like to say that the Housing Development Administration of Turkey was founded in 1984. Up until 2003, we were not able to indeed build as many houses as we like to. So Housing and Development Administration was able to develop and built 19,000 of buildings in 19 years, but in the starting from 2003, in 14 years of time, we constructed approximately 775,000 new buildings. Last but not least, this year we have the target of constructing 65,000 new buildings on the minimum level. These figures are important figures, as you know. Despite all those events, I would like to say that the people who are working in the real estate sector are indeed the factors that Turkey should be proud of. In Turkey, the ownership of the buildings didn't increase, although we constructed 775,000 new buildings in the last 14 years. That's why we believe we should indeed create a new trend for making people own houses, especially in the low income and mid income societal strata. That's why we believe we should indeed shape our targets according to that. Thank you very much. I would like to say hello to everyone. My name is Özcan Tayincioğlu, and I am the chairman of the board of Tayincioğlu Holding. I would like to build on what has been said by the previous speakers. Of course, construction is the foundation of our sector, and we all know that Turkey is quite a successful country when it comes to the construction, and Turkey is at the top 3 countries in the construction sector, and we have many things to teach to many countries, but we are the developing companies that I would like to say. The previous speaker summarized it. Whenever you involved in a project, the 50% or the 60% of the project should be completed in the development phase of the project. But when it comes to the practice, this is not the reality, unfortunately. The 80% of our energy is spent in the bureaucratic processes. and this is a huge waste for anyone present in this sector. Let me quote a story right here. I was in the secondary school and there was a debate club, and we were discussing about the school problems in front of the teachers. The classes were so intense, the behaviors of the teachers were among the points that we have discussed. And unfortunately, as I frankly spoke about the problems of the school, I had a terrible time at the school and my rates dropped a lot. I will not, of course, do the same mistake once again since there are many bureaucrats. I won't say that we have bureaucratic problems. The president, the chairman of the board of Housing Development Administration, put it very rightly that the Turkish society is in need of buildings and houses which will address to the needs of the low income and middle income strata, social strata of Turkey. And we also would like to contribute to such need and fulfill that need, but unfortunately, the rising land prices are unfortunately tying our hands. And as a result of that, we are obliged to address the high income social strata, and this is resulting in inflation from time to time. That's all what I would like to say in the first round. Thank you very much. My name is Süleyman Çetinsaya. Distinguished guests, for 2 days we have been listening to the speakers and the meeting is quite nice. Once again, I would like to thank the Capitalist magazine for organizing this indeed meeting. The TOKİ is indeed the driving force of our sector, and we are the wagons in this driving engine, in this driving train. Starting from 2003 up until now, 780,000 of new buildings was constructed approximately, although it was only 20,000 in the previous 19 years. I come from a socioeconomically low family. When we came to Istanbul, we were indeed staying in the basement of the apartment, and we were on rent, and there was a humidity problem in the apartment, and we didn't know about that problem since we are a child back then. I am in this sector for the last 40 years, and since I had such an experience of living in the basement, I never built a basement in my constructions, and I never had a legal problem. The aim of all of our speakers is to provide a high-quality building to each one of you. And we want you to accommodate in those buildings in high and higher qualities. We want families who will reside in those buildings to live a happy life and raise their kids with high quality. And of course, we are trying to make some profits, but nobody will take their money with them after they pass away. So if we want to develop high-quality buildings, the TOKİ, Housing Development Administration of Turkey, should also construct buildings for the mid and low-income social strata, because all of the buildings that have been constructed so far is not enough, because in the real estate sector we are only addressing to the needs of the 20% of the society, and the 80%, the rest of the 80% of the population still in needs of accommodation. Since the land prices are so high, our hands are tied. If the necessary discounts are made on the land prices, as the constructors, we will do our best. We want our citizens not to be the tenants, but we want our citizens to live in their own houses. And unfortunately, we have many unhealthy buildings. Maybe the ones who are sitting in this room, you might be living in the healthy buildings, but if you go to the Anatolian side, you will see that the people are living in those unhealthy buildings, in dangerous buildings. And we have to indeed commit our best efforts to make those people live in happier conditions. Thank you very much.
Öncelikle Ekonomist dergisine
Firstly, thank you, Economist and Capital. I was in this summit last year too. It was really a successful event. And the same is going on with this instance of the event too. I am the chairman of the board of DAP Yapı. I am a father of 5 children. To introduce myself, a lot of the things have already been mentioned by my colleagues. But like I said, we are trying to meet the sheltering need of our citizens. I would like to quote a story from Amsterdam. Back in the day, we were in Amsterdam with my wife. There was this taxi driver who was driving us in the city. He told us that he was living in a 750-year-old building. In my country, here in Turkey, you can't even single out any such buildings which are still habitable. So DAP Yapı wants to make sure there are buildings like that one where you can live not only today but also in the future without having to worry about it. 20 to 30 years later, I would like people to be proud of the investment they have made for a house, especially if it's a house that was built by my company. This I am telling you because after the 99 earthquake, Turkey had a really good chance. At the moment, we have 6 to 7 million residential buildings which have to be refurbished, actually pulled down and rebuilt. But at the moment, we are only able to pull down 3-floor houses. Some buildings are coated with marble. We are now refurbishing them with better coating material, for instance. This opportunity should be exploited really well, because otherwise we will have missed the train and people will have to leave these uninhabitable houses in the future too. This is all for now. There are some themes in this first round of questions that I paid attention to. If I have to think about it, I have understood that land prices are the first red flag for real estate developers. Currently, a lot of the land around the country are owned by the public. About 56% of all the lands is owned by the public, actually. So this is something we need to tackle. With such a population and with only 40%, just a little bit of over 40% of lands available to them, investors are facing a tough situation. Secondly, there is the intellectual side of things. It's all about measuring supply and demand, not only quantitatively but also qualitatively, so that demand can be met in a more feasible manner rather than cramping up the place with buildings. Then we have the planning and bureaucracy layer of things. It is a framework which is probably a little bit problematic. Just like Özcan said, we are kind of not willing to complain, but it should be noted that bureaucratically, real estate developers require some leeway, I believe. All the panelists on this session are firms that we are offering consultancy services. So I do know about their woes, and I know how much time they have to spend on creating the correct products. In the meantime, they have to struggle and wrestle with bureaucracy, which limits their efforts. The growth spurt that we are achieving and will have to achieve in the future requires us to go beyond these bureaucratic difficulties. Mr. Özcan, I would like to ask you about the land issue. What kind of lands should be made available so that the mid and low income segments of the society can be catered to? Well, the ideas that we have listened to were really fine, but I am representing the bureaucracy side of things. So I should make some remarks. I think most of these real estate developers come from Istanbul. I also come from the same city, although I am not representing a private firm like them. But Turkey is not just one city. We have 81 cities and a large land area. However, a big portion of the citizens inhabit Istanbul. This is why usually land development is discussed over the example of Istanbul. I have been working in the field of land development in Istanbul for about 15 years myself, so I will safely speak depending on this experience and tell you what I think. Istanbul is surrounded with the sea. Some part of it is agricultural lands, and some part of it is covered with forests, and some part of it is covered by watersheds. It's actually a problematic land itself. When you consider all of these factors together, you could talk on and on about Istanbul and how you could make things better for land allocation in this city. And then there is the impending doom of the Istanbul earthquake that is swinging above our heads. We expect it. Everybody is speculating, but obviously in the next 30 years we will have such a big disaster. There is a lack of planning for the buildings already among the old buildings. So when we are thinking of building new social residential buildings, we should not just talk about how we will fill the building stock, but also how we can give some breathing room for the citizens. In some places, for square meters, we have as many as 10 people inhabiting a building. There is a cramping up picture here. But we are not helpless, we are working on it. Maybe later I can go into the details later. But we are trying to do our part. We, as the Housing Development Administration of Turkey, are trying to do our best in order to help citizens and the private sector in the real estate development area. Other than that, we are not active, not just in Istanbul, but also in all 81 provinces. As it was mentioned, the state already has lots of land owned in different cities. Regardless of what we do about land development, it is meaningless as long as there is no demand. But let's talk with figures. In the Karaman city, within the last 2.5 years, we have built about 2,000 houses. Currently, we are receiving information about demand, but the demand is already high. More than 6 to 7 times the capacity of these buildings is the demand we are receiving at the moment. In cities where you wouldn't expect much of a demand, we are already seeing people stating their willingness. Well, it is good news that when you make sure a citizen can buy a house in his own city, he won't or she won't have to leave that city later. That is a tying connection. This is why we should also discuss people's adherence to their cities. I mean, yes, as a corporation, as an institution, we care a lot about Istanbul because we do not receive direct public funding. Just like my private sector representative colleagues here, we are trying to generate our revenue in cities like Nevşehir. We develop land, we develop projects, and we generate revenue on top of it. That revenue is used to create buildings in Anatolian cities. In the upcoming period, however, I believe there is going to be a shrinking effect in the sector. Due to this stuck-up situation, we will have to make sure that there will be land allocatable for the middle income segment. Currently, the situation is dire. So, Mr. Aziz, from a planning perspective, we have already mentioned supply and demand. But how about the factors that generate the demand for residences? The growing population is a factor that is obvious, but in Turkey, the greatest demand comes from the fact that we still have a building stock of 7 million buildings which need to be refurbished as the aftermath of the 99 earthquake. But you know, there will be more demand in the future. That is a reality. So when planning about the need, the supply and demand within the framework of master plans and other measures, what should we take into account? Up until now, this sector, the building industry and real estate sector, usually had more demand than supply. So developers did not care much about this planning side of things. But of course, purchasing power, demographic structure, and the status of the people in terms of income are three of the factors we need to take a look at before deciding to come up with building projects. Then we have our own intrinsic financing model. We build and we directly sell to generate revenue. We sell residences, flats, and offices. Even when designing projects, we have to take this into consideration. I mean, how many offices are going to be sold, or what scale of flats are going to be sold in that city. But we do realize that there is a congestion coming. People are concerned about the real estate boom effect. I mean, currently, we don't have that balloon effect where the balloon is going to burst out soon. But we need to reconsider, as developers, our priorities. We need to analyze the target audience, the demographic structure, and the income circumstances reigning over that city. so that we are able to sell the product we created. Maybe we need to develop different modes of real estate. For instance, the Turkish Housing Development Administration representative would also inform you that there is this real estate certificate that they have developed. This is going to be a new financing model, not really a purchasing model, but a strategic model for us. Maybe we should shift from flats to commercial buildings with the emergence of these certificates for a better income influx, for example, shopping centers or plazas, maybe dormitories which are required all around Turkey. We as real estate developers do not attribute a lot of importance to them right now. After certification, though, with the help of this certificate introduced by the Housing Administration, we may consider these new grounds, maybe even as long-term investments. And the partnerships, real estate partnerships, are currently viewed as cash after completion of projects, but maybe we need to view them in a different manner as long-term investments. Özcan, I would like to go on with you. Let's go on with the discussion about commercial buildings. What kind of trends are identified and what are the future prospects in that area? When you talk about real estate, of course, residences are not the only option. Commercial buildings, of course, are needed in every sector. They are correlated. They are relevant. For example, in Istanbul, the office market covers a space of 5 million square meters. In the upcoming years, I believe this capacity is going to reach 7.5 million square meters. I mean, we will need at least 2.5 million square meters. Last year, however, we saw a plummet in terms of office rental demands. This was a dire picture for us. I am taking note of it because Mr. Aziz has already said that there is no balloon effect in this sector. And I am not just talking arbitrarily. I have my macro data to back me up. There are no segment-specific issues, actually, but I believe we as developers are to blame for the issues we are experiencing. Maybe we fail to understand the balances and maintain them. But it all comes down to land development. Of course, city planners, municipalities, metropolitan municipalities, when drafting their master plans, allocate specific areas for new housing projects, and we have to adhere to them. Probably at that point, we need to understand and drive this supply-demand balance better. A platform could surely help us. Mr. Aziz has Gyodar, for example. I am a member of the board in that structure, an umbrella structure under which we are in constant dialogue with local governments and municipalities for that coordination to be established. Still, on the other hand, as we are a locomotive or a driving force of growth and development, we need to be able to go beyond umbrella associations, umbrella organizations' efforts, and be able to receive some incentives so as to remove that congestion in the field of real estate and land development. Of course, if I have to go back to commercial real estate, we are not only talking about offices, there are stores and shopping centers too. and shopping centers have recently become a point of discussion. They are an item of the agenda. I have this same example I am providing all the time. We, as Tainci Holding, are building our third shopping center. We are not a great player. The foreign investors have a stronger deck in their hands because in the past, when they penetrated the market, we did not have a lot of long-term budgeting opportunities. So they acted early on and they have scaled better distance. But rather than complaining about the number of foreign investors in the field of shopping centers, I believe that we should be talking about being able to receive long-term financing on the basis of foreign exchange by banks, maybe on the basis of dollar or euros. Especially the recent uprising of the dollars also gave us a troublesome situation. I don't want to go into the details because some negotiations are underway. Everybody is trying to shoulder their own burden. But I would like to make one more point without wasting your time. Especially in recent years, something important became apparent. We, as Tayincioğlu, conduct real estate development activities abroad too. In New York, for example, we have already built some buildings and we continue to do so. We have investments in place. And therefore, I see it directly firsthand that abroad real estate purchasing budgets are really great. This is kind of sad for me, although this is good news abroad for my own building projects. It is sad news for my own country because a lot of things were done, like granting citizenship to foreign investors who buy houses. We still don't see such an influx, such a boost of incentives to other purchases. I can see that there is an alarming change in the landscape of this purchasing environment. Thank you. Let's change the tempo a little bit and go on with another topic.
So I would like to raise a question to Mr. Erden about disruptive technology and the innovation. And as being one of the leader of such an innovative company, could you please go into details about the innovations in real estate sector and how much intellectual investment you should do in this sector? Could you give us a couple of information? Well, as long as you dream, and as long as you think where this real estate sector will go, I believe people will not own things, so people will indeed go back to their origins. So such kind of placelessness will be the reality. So I believe we will turn back to ourselves. For example, let's think about the cars. Right now there is car sharing system in the Uber, for example. Uber doesn't even have a car, but they indeed hire more car than any other car leasing company, or they actually transport people from one place to another without even having a car. Ownership is an important concept in the lives of the human being, and maybe people will own some values, but people will not own such kind of products. They will have those values, and the products will be available to the common use. ownership of the information is over right now because the information is quite democratized right now. And the sharing economy is starting to be quite essential. And I believe that there will be the democratization of the ownership in the future. And when you speak about the disruptive technology, the disruption word is having some negative connotations, but this is not right. Whenever I hear about disruptive technology, I really believe that, first of all, indeed the people should indeed disrupt their cravings, first of all. What will happen with the technology? The Internet of Things brought smart houses to us 10 years before. In the first smart house that I have developed, for example, the curtains were closing down when there was a wind blowing. I thought that, those smart houses would sell a lot, but at those times, the smart houses didn't indeed penetrate into our lives as we desired. But since with the Internet of Things, I believe the smart houses will be a reality on the global scale. And it will have also important impact for the developers, and we will find some solutions for the happiness of the people who are living in their smart houses. Maybe since the placelessness will be the reality, we will, for example, provide landscape solutions to the people. Whenever we say feeling, everybody is thinking about some emotions, but that feeling will be the basis for each solutions. And the people will definitely see the places that they will miss with such innovative houses. Mr. Süleyman, you have involved in big projects, in hybrid projects, and you have projects in which you are creating a living style. And I also would like to go back to the urban transformation and listen what you think about the urban transformation. I believe there is a lack of authority and transparency when it comes to the urban transformation, because the stakeholders, which are the parties of the urban transformation, have huge traumas as they started to come up with some solutions. Because during the urban transformation process, everybody is coming up with different figures about the prices of the lands, and this totally create a chaos. And I believe this is also challenging for you as well, because you have to continue with your urban transformation process for years. But what do you think about the urban transformation process? You know that Urban Transformation Act was enacted in 2012. It is a really good law, although this law was quite late when it was enacted, but it is still that we embrace. Three new law was enacted with regards to the urban transformation. In 2013, the society tried to understand what the law is actually saying. Of course, the urban transformation is taking place from the households and also from the industrial buildings. And when the transformation is taking place from the households, there has been some challenges and some problems. And from time to time, the Ministry of Environment is also a party of this urban transformation process, but it is not easy to satisfy the needs and desires of the people when we make the urban transformation. Because I mean, those people are living in those areas for 20 years or 30 years. They were indeed living in areas in the shanty houses, and without any program, unfortunately, these people live in those houses, which led to irregular and unguided urbanization. And such twisted urbanization, irregular urbanization, required the urban transformation. And I really want to prevent conflicts between the contractors and the citizens, because the contractors and the citizens cannot come to a consensus. I mean, I don't know what the contractors can actually do. They could either revise the urban transformation plans, and this will also require the municipalities and the Ministry of Environment to step in. Unfortunately, huge fights and conflicts are taking place between the contractors and the citizens. Some of our contractors are even going bankrupt because of such conflicts. That we have the Fikirtepe example. In the most beautiful places of Istanbul, unfortunate events took place with regards to urban transformation. If you want us to construct healthy buildings, the district municipalities should also involve in the process, and district municipalities should find their constructors, and on the island basis, I mean land island basis, that urban transformation should take place. Urban transformation cannot be implemented based on 3 houses or 5 houses. Some of the municipalities are actually implementing the right thing. I don't know what the chairman of the board of the Housing Development Administration of Turkey is thinking about it, but in a nutshell, I can say we are supporting TOKİ, the Housing Development Administration of Turkey. I really believe that district municipalities should indeed touch to this urban transformation without touching to the historical legacy. But the constructors and the citizens should not be in conflict, because I mean the house is the only thing that a citizen owns. If you destroy their houses and if you elongate the time after which they will return to their houses, then their whole life will be in shatters. So anyone who is going to execute this, the investors should also have certain profits. If the investors will not have some profits, then huge conflicts will indeed go up. Unfortunately, when we are speaking about profitability in the Turkish equivalent, there is also the equivalent word of unearned income. That's why this word is indeed understood quite negatively. I don't know why this word has a negative connotation, but when we are making an analysis for the urban transformation, we should preserve the profit for indeed certain stakeholders. So we shouldn't understand the profitability of the stakeholders as a negative thing when it comes to the urban transformation. Mr. Ziya, you have huge experience in the urban transformation. Could you please listen to your recommendations? Mr. Süleyman already touched upon very good things. Indeed, the income and the earned income is indeed an important value for the businesses. So the businesses can only survive if they earn income. The urban transformation actually is understood by the public, but unfortunately, due to some gaps and deficits in certain regulations and legislation, and due to the fact that some of the municipalities avoided urban transformation, and the people who was defined as the helpers indeed rushed to certain areas wherever they see huge opportunity for high incomes. TOKİ, Kiptaş, these kind of institutions and also the district municipalities should indeed involve in the process, and they should not manipulate with the prices, and we can do the urban transformation without huge challenges. I also try to reiterate in my speech, we have an opportunity right now on our hands. Maybe 20 years later or 30 years later, we will say, we really wish we could have made use of this opportunity. I really hope we will not regret. On the morning session, the Minister of Transportation said that Turkey is in such a geographical situation with a 3 or 4 hours of travel distance, we can indeed reach to 1.5 billion people, and we can reach to a market of approximately $31 billion. So I keep saying the same statement all the time in each platform, and I also would like to repeat what I have always said. We have an institution which is called TOKİ, the Housing Development Administration of Turkey. We have Emlak Konut, another housing institution in Turkey. Maybe under their auspices, under their roof, extra committee or general directorate might be established. We can look at the world map and we can define some 20 or 30 countries with the high potential. And the big companies in the real estate sector might be defined, and he said a share might be allocated by the budget for further real estate projects. But this kind of a project should be conducted in alliance with the governmental policy. So, for example, if the Arab countries like the Trabzon region, Black Sea region, we will advertise this region and we will open our offices, and with thanks to all of those, the real estate sector will develop and the tourism sector will develop as well. From time to time, the real estate sector is thought to be indeed developing with no solid grounds. And with such kind of projects, we might indeed solve those kinds of problems in the real estate sector. And London is, for example, selling real estate with $58 billion of volume of transactions to the foreign people, and the United States is selling $144 billion valued buildings to abroad. So right now we are at the figure of 4.4 billion, and we have to revise this. I went to the Dubai many times. We have a friend who was indeed the schoolmate of El Maktoum, and he said that El Maktoum is sleeping and waking up with the figures of the sellings of real estates. Because of the European policies and defamation policies of the Europe, unfortunately, there is a bad understanding about Turkey. If we can conduct such a project that I have just mentioned to you, then we can really increase the sales. Okay, let's continue with the financing of the real estate, and let's continue with the subject of how to turn real estate to an export commodity. And we shouldn't only see the real estate export only as selling buildings to the foreigners, but it will also be important for attracting the foreign direct investments here. And we have some problems in terms of attracting the foreign direct investment to Turkey. Maybe this can also solve this problem. I believe we only sold 16,000 houses and buildings to the foreigners in 2016. Of course, it is not possible to give the floor to everyone in such time limitation. First of all, please speak about the real estate financing, especially in terms of the financing of the projects, and what will be your recommendations for solving the problems in terms of financing the real estate projects? And then I really would like to hear from Özcan what we can do about attracting the foreign capital to our country. One of the most challenging topics of us is the low financing opportunities. And as Turkey, I believe we have problems in terms of the cost and finding the right financing and cheap financing tools. Despite all of those, the investments are ongoing. In terms of attracting the capital from the capital markets, unfortunately, Turkey does not have many opportunities. The value of the stock exchange is approximately $200 billion. If you make a comparison of that figure with the GDP, it equals to 30% of our GDP. But this ratio is over 100% in the United States, and it is approximately 80 to 90% in the developed countries. Our most valuable company on the stock exchange market is over $10 billion, but Apple has the value of over $730 billion. So there is such huge differences. First of all, we have to increase the number of our companies which are listed in the stock exchange. And not only as Turkey, but through the ventures, we should be able to collect and attract the loans and capitals to Turkey. We have been speaking with Mr. Yüksel. Unfortunately, the loans are given to us based on the foreign exchange, with the foreign currency. And the fluctuations in the foreign exchange is having a huge negative impact on the companies who are intending to invest. And these unexpected increases in the foreign exchanges are leading companies to be unsustainable. And at the same time, it makes our country even poorer. Therefore, we really need sustainability in that regard. And through partnership and via stock exchange and via the certification in the real estate and through the real estate investment funds and trusts, we should develop partnership models so that our risk will be reduced and we will be able to reach to cheap loan and credit opportunities. If we are to speak about FDI in the real estate sector, unfortunately, the FDI is lower than it is desired. Erden made an important initiative, and we have spoken about his project, and at the end, after 18 months, he undersigned an important business project, and the foreign direct investment and the foreign capital aiming the real estate is an important topic. And we indeed worked a lot in order to realize this. We went to many road shows, we went to many seminars, because I believe that on the long term there will be a consolidation in the real estate sector as the projects grew even bigger. With the higher financing opportunities, better projects will be able to will be indeed implemented. Up until now, we were not very successful in that regard. The ones who would like to invest in Turkey were generally comprised of the funds who were waiting for higher returns, higher profitabilities. I mean, unintentionally, we turned our faces to the Eastern capitals because the Eastern capitals were satisfied with the lower return rates, and that's why we try to make use of the East countries' capitals. And we also see this issue not only in the foreign investments, but also in the foreign acquisitions. Although the sellings of our products reduced by 6.5%, this shows us that the prices are indeed growing on the unit basis, and I believe this $1 billion of investment for providing the citizenship, although it is high, might be an important solution. In the last 10 years, one of the reasons why the foreign capital came less to our country, we still grew a lot, and we grew even more with comparison to previous years. In that regard, we were quite successful, but on the long term, we are financing our projects with the banks, and because of the defamation policies of the Europe, each sector has been affected by that. And whenever we have the chance, we should speak about the truth, because this is affecting both the finance sector and also the real estate sector. I don't want to extend my speech even further. The investments in the real estate is so low, and I don't think that this is going to change in the short term, but if they are not present in our markets, our transactions will be even higher. Let's very briefly speak about the financing opportunities. Let me say one thing before our president.
Other than the Emlak Konut and its revenue sharing, I think we need a guarantor status allocated to a specific party, because our expenses and expenditures are under control. What we do is like we are showing mannequins and models to people and selling non-existing houses. This is not really the correct way to go, because soon enough we will see aggravated parties. The correct path would be having a bank that would play a guarantor role, which could undertake our commitment, and in return for the progress payments in every month, the bank could be in charge of delivering our payments. You should understand that every time there are flats sold by a colleague, only when just a model is existing, and when the construction process has to be halted due to problems, our hearts break. Last week on Monday, we undersigned the ERD partnership agreement. EBRD is going to be engaged with the first real estate partnership in Turkey with us, by the way. At least in the build and sell formula, they will be engaged in the partnership in Turkey for the first time. It is going to be a long-term partnership, and just like Özcan said, we spent 18 months on drafting the agreement. In the past, when I created my first firm, I remember how difficult it was for me to conduct business. I even remember having to consult a friend who had to open my company on my behalf due to my limited resources. When you become a big company and look for companies that can partner with you, you should be able to say that you are already at a great place. We are in a really good position in the list of OECD partners members. But due to the lack of demographic analysis back in the day, we lost a lot of market share to the foreigners. Some things are really difficult for us to explain to foreigners. First of all, the land development rights are not permanent. For instance, they do not understand that really well. The second thing, which we have already resolved thanks to the real estate investment fund, which was also mentioned by Ziya and my colleagues, is that we need to promote and describe our country to foreign investors. We don't strictly have to think about sales, but also leasings. We don't have a residential building leasing system right now, but all emerging and developing countries have that model in their real estate development agencies. Of course, then again, if we go back to the sales to foreigners, that is important in terms of tackling some of the issues we have. We are running out of time. I would like to end this session with you, Mr. Mehmet. Please just take 1.5 minutes for closing. I am really grateful that we are talking about strictly the real estate sector in this session. I am not in the position to talk about the private sector, but my institution also represents a powerful player, as it is the Housing Development Administration of Turkey. Within the last 12 to 13 years, the real estate success that we have achieved went in parallel to the development story of Turkey overall. We have just listened to small anecdotes about the life stories of the participants. These are just examples of how we come from different backgrounds, but we all understand stories of success in the end. But as I said, this is a part of Turkey's story of success. Since 2010, however, we have had some problems with growth. And during these debates about the upcoming referendum, the main point that is being criticized is the fact that we are having troubles about growth because people have increased their annual income and they don't want to stop here. They want to go further. This is why we have to rewrite the story and build upon it. Real estate markets is not my field of specialization, but I can tell you that we have about $12 billion dollars of budget that my administration generates and spends. The public allocates us some incentive only to a certain extent, but we are doing our best to generate our income, and my private sector colleagues are also a driving force behind the administration. They are really needed in that news story I believe Turkey should write as well. However, in Turkey, before the real estate market, I think we need more depth in the investment markets. Mr. Aziz described it really well. Currently, we have a volume of $200 billion, but we need more depth in that investment market. We need better instruments. Without going into details, let me remind you that we need an interest-free instruments. We still have money kept in households without even depositing that in banks. I mean, millions of people in Turkey are looking for interest-free gaining. They are unable to start their businesses. They are unable to open the store, but they are left out of the system. We need instruments to reintegrate them. Previously, we listened to finance representatives. Maybe they could give us a better figure about how much money, how much saving is kept in households by citizens rather than depositing it to banks. This is an idle capacity we are not using as part of the investment environment. The idea is being realized partially as a part of our project. It's kind of risky, and I don't know if it will be successful, but I have full belief that we can rewrite the story of Turkey. Without that, we won't be achieving the growth rates desired anyway. With the savings of the housing administration and with the contributions of my colleagues, we can do that. For example, we are a public venture. Together with an umbrella association, maybe we can engage in a new model about attracting real estate investments from abroad because our status allows it. We have mentioned the emergence of the real estate certificate we are going to be implementing. That is also another point we can think about on domestic level. But turbulences are present because of the long-term financing needs of our private sector players. However, on the other hand, apart from the issues, our real estate representatives are ready to break new grounds. These people around me can really achieve a lot of things. We were invited by Saudi Arabia, in Pakistan, and by African countries. All they want is to give us, allocate us some piece of land, and then we are to develop that land into a real estate. But we are not able to make a lot of moves in the current situation due to the lack of the financial instruments we so urgently require. So as I conclude my words, thank you for inviting us, and thank you to my colleagues in this panel for sharing their contributions. If you allow me, I have some things to say. I will summarize actually. It was said in the last speech that if we are to rewrite our growth story, first of all, these entrepreneurs, these developers should be freed from the weight of bureaucracy. Secondly, we need flexibility in planning and land development. As a result of analysis of investors and beneficiaries, we need flexibility, which will give us the opportunity to plan ahead of our building efforts rather than haphazardly going for projects and completing them. Well, legislative issues are also there about licenses and license holding capabilities. As it was mentioned, however, the real estate development sector is really promising for the future. Thank